Good morning, and how are you? And how are those wedding plans getting on? I am filming this, if you're watching on catch up, in April. It's beginning mid of April. We're in the middle of the global pandemic with COVID-19, and this week I don't have any flowers of appropriate size to work with, so I'm going to show you how to make a flower crown, and I will be using greenery from my garden. So don't be put off, it's all about technique. You can make your flower crown out of whatever you want to make it out of, but using greenery is a really good way to get going and to have a good old practice. So for this you will need some corsage tape, buttonhole tape. You'll need some floristry wires in a variety of sizes. This is a 0.71 wire, which I'm going to make the band for putting on my flower crown. And I've also got some 0.56s to wire up my individual materials. So I will show you the wiring techniques that you will have seen them before in the carnation buttonhole and the rose buttonhole videos. And it may well be that I might not actually finish my flower crown, but I will show you enough so that you can finish your own project. You'll end up with a piece of a band of greenery as long as the circumference of your head. So it may be just that time will take over. I've allowed myself 50 minutes for this project, so we'll have to see how much I can do in 50 minutes. So do not worry, if flower crowns are your thing and you're going to have a flower crown at your wedding, I will definitely come back and revisit this project. There are a number of different techniques I can show you, and also it would be nice to add some flowers in at a later point in time when we aren't all in isolation. But first things first, we need to tape up some of the longer 71 wires. So you don't have to remember everything like this. I will do a separate post with the ingredients on it for your flower crown with links to Amazon so you can buy them. So as you've seen me doing before, I'm pinching my tape onto my wire, stretching my tape out and twisting my wire into my tape. And I'm going to do 3 wires like this because I think that'll give me enough length to go around my head. Hello, I'm hoping, is that Joan? Are you back from your mum's house, Joan? Or is it Vanessa catching us live? You'll have to leave me a comment. Hi, hello. I've only just started, Joan. I've got another meeting at 12 o'clock. So we've got 50 minutes today. I'm making my flower crown, as you would have seen in the description box, using greenery because I don't have flowers at the moment. And what I'm doing is taping my 71 wires to form the base, and this is what I'm going to make my flower crown on. So the question for me, Joan, is have you made a flower crown before? So are you learning it brand new today, or are you practicing, revisiting your skills? So you'll have to let me know. So I'm going to, the idea is you want a piece of wire that will fit around your head. I think actually I might be okay with 2. So I'm then going to overlap the wires by a couple of centimetres and tape that together. And when you're using the wires, you can see they ping everywhere. So when you start off with your flower crown, everything goes really smoothly until you're about halfway through, and then you'll find that you've got a lot of weight on the other end, but we'll come to that in due course. So my crown is going to fit together using a sort of hook and eye treatment. So I am going to bend this wire over to create an eye, pinch it down, and then I'm going to tape that in place. So you can imagine, whoops, that when I have finished, yeah, Joan, whatever goes, Joan. If you're having a big flamboyant wedding, you want huge blousy flowers, go for it. But if you want something all delicate and petite, go delicate and petite. I think delicate and petite is easier because everything is more lightweight. When you see those lovely flower crowns with the, really, really over the top flowers, they're quite heavy to wear, but also the flower heads can be a little bit insecure as well. So is personal preference. Everything. My answer to everything is personal preference. I think it is easier to make a much more secure and therefore long-lasting flower crown if you're using small to medium-sized flowers, and to save the blousy ones for another day, really. You could also always add in silks and glue them in, and then the way you attach your flower crown together is you put the other end in there and you hook it back. That's what I mean by the hook and eye. So you've created the eye there and the hook there, and that is how you fix your crown together, and you will need to adjust it to size. So when you're coming to make the real thing, you will need to make sure you have measured your recipient's head size and where they want to wear the crown. So sometimes, you know, people want to wear them really low down on the head like that, and sometimes it's more of a sort of backwards on the head. So you do need to decide where they're going to be worn. And of course there is a little bit of play because you can tighten them up and you'd cut off the excess. So I think I would want it a tiny bit, I would say like that for me. So I've got a bit of excess there. So what I would do is trim off the excess and put a bit of wire over the end, because you don't want to be cut there. A bit of wire, a bit of tape, I mean, over the end, just to seal that in place. So that is number one. You need to know how big your crown needs to be. So I am going to swish the camera over so you can see where I'm working, and I'm going to start off by wiring my materials. I've got three things I'm going to use. Decorative conifer. I've got some eucalyptus out of a vase of flowers that I had at the weekend, and I have mentioned before that eucalyptus does dry out, and I've picked these three stems out of the vase, and one stem is healthier and the other two have dried out. So I don't know whether that is my user error and my stems weren't far enough down inside my vase, or whether it's just my bad luck with using eucalyptus, but I do find it does dry out very quickly. So I'm feeling all very regal as I'm holding my crown on my head. I am going to spin you over, and so there'll be a little bit of movement as I adjust where I am going to work. So hopefully you will get to see. I can zoom in a little bit. So there we are. Hopefully Facebook will pick that up and I can use that as the cover photo for my video, and then you'll know where to find it next time. So in front of me I have got my 0.71 wires, which I used as my base for the crown. I didn't need three, so it just depends on how long your wires are and how big your head is. And then I've got a packet of 56 wires here. If you were adding in finer flowers or roses, you'd need to have your rose wires as well. And then my selection of greenery. So I've got the eucalyptus parvifolia, which is a small leaf eucalyptus, and some decorative conifer, and some joysia as well. I might not use that because although it's quite small, I just think perhaps the leaves are large in relation to everything else. So it's about keeping everything in scale. So the first job is to sit and wire. So I think you need to break this activity up into the prep and then the creation. And it is the prep that is going to take you ages to do, because you've got to physically touch every single bit of your greenery. So I'm going to cut sprigs, and again, it depends how chunky you want your crown to be. I'm going to move that out of the way so you can see me more clearly. So I have done between finger and thumb. It's probably the length of my first finger, a little bit taller than my little finger. If you wanted a more flamboyant crown, you might have longer pieces of material, but they will flop. The longer and the bigger you get, the more movement you get, and you may find it does things that you don't want to do. So I would err on the side of caution and go for medium to small rather than medium to large. So with my eucalyptus it's quite handy because I can go through down each stem and cut off, and you can't tell which were the original fine tips and which are the slightly sort of woodier bits at the end. And it's really hard to know how many materials you need. It depends again whether your natural style is to work in a slightly more chunky fashion or if you really want everything to be slimline. So you need to make sure you've got plenty of materials, and it certainly does eat materials up. I think you need more than you think you need. So cutting everything down as sparingly as possible. I want to use every bit of this stem. So I'll have to see how many pieces I got out of it. These are getting slightly woodier here. So I'm left with that. And in front of me I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22 pieces. But again, no two stems of green are the same. So I'm going to start off with those. It may be one of these projects that perhaps I'll have to come back and show you the finished article. So I'll try and move those out of the way. So wiring as we've done before. So I'm using a 0.56 wire, which is quite lightweight. If you find this is too stiff, you need to come down to a rose wire. I'm going to see whether I can do what we call a single leg mount. So I'm curving my wire over, lying that with the parallel with the natural stem, taking the long wire over everything 2, 3, 4 times, smoothing it down, and then possibly cutting out the woody stem. My stem isn't too long there. So I'm going to wire up quite a few pieces to begin with and then tape. So again, get this production line going. Just thinking I've got quite a lot to do. You just need to find the most efficient way of working that suits you. So I would be doing these ahead of time. So I would be wiring up one day, taping, and then putting it together the next day. It's an awfully time-consuming job. Beautiful as these flower crowns are, they are time-consuming to do. And my top tip would be to space your materials out more than you would imagine, so that you travel down your length of your flower crown base. Otherwise you'll end up with a really beautiful but chunky crown, and you'll find the 20 stems you've added have only covered the first 10 centimetres, whereas if you spaced everything out you could get it to cover a much greater distance. So it's a matter of, by way of example, you could have all these pieces here quite tightly packed. Oops, try to pick those up, which looks nice and bushy. But just think, if you lengthen them out and space them out a bit, you could have a length of green which was twice as long. So it's your decision. Chunky monkey, full of life and exuberant, but very time consuming, and also you'll need loads of materials, or whether you space things out a bit so that you get more coverage but a slimmer line flower crown. So you can see that you will need loads of materials. With the decorative conifer here, it's slightly more delicate, so this time I'm going to push my wire through that branch and hook it over so it's got something to hook around. Sometimes with the finer stems there's nothing to grip onto. And I might thin that out a bit chunky compared to everything else. This is a woodier stem, so I can probably do my wiring direct onto the woody stem. Cut myself some smaller pieces. Here, making a cross piece there, down and round. Oops. And here I have got a bit of woodiness, so I will clip that out. This is quite scented actually. I can smell the eucalyptus, but also there's a a sort of a lemony scent coming off this conifer. So we think of conifers as being really, really boring, but actually they do have a lovely scent. So there's a few bundles there, and if I was going to wire the choisier leaves, I think I would do them as individual stems. Now I haven't bought my rose wires here, so I'll have to see how I get on with my green wires, but you could add ivy leaves in. If you're having ivy on your buttonholes, you can put ivy in your flower crown. We'll have to see how this works. So I'm stitching through with my 0.56. It may well be my 0.56 is too stiff and it's going to rip my choisier. So the way you find out whether it works or not is to give it a go. And that's not too bad. But I would say overall it does feel too heavy, and I would be happier using a silver wire there. So you can wire up the individual leaves or to wire up in bunches. So we'll make a start with the taping, and again it's exactly the same as the taping you've done for the carnation and the rose buttonhole. So pull out the tape and twist. You don't need to go all the way down. I probably go a third of the way down, because we'll be cutting out all the excess all the time. You're cutting out all the excess material and wires, because you don't want that bulk and weight to be on your bride's head, especially if she has decided to go for a more exuberant flower crown. She doesn't want to be carrying all those thick, chunky stems and getting really hot as well. And to remember, you know, what time of year the wedding's taking place in. It's in the height of summer, and you're choosing delicate flowers for everything else. You know, is the flower crown the right thing to do? Because your head is hot and you've got the hot weather. Are they going to survive? It's one of those things where you want a cool day, really. Plan a cool day, but with plenty of sunshine afterwards. So I think what I would do, as I've chopped up all that my fine stem of eucalyptus, that I might have a little bit of a eucalyptus binge. So if you are watching this on catch up, you might want to skip the next bit, because I'm just going to be doing more of the same. So this is sort of being making as live. I can feel already my thumb is starting to complain a bit. So you'll need to get your thumbs and fingers into practice. I've not left myself much of a stem there. So for security, I'm going to hook it around that leaf. And then I've probably gone around 4 times. I'm not quite sure about the focus. So I will take some close-up photographs afterwards. You don't, so you're wrapping around long enough to be secure, but you're not going all the way down. You just want a couple of millimetres of wrap in order that nothing falls apart, but you don't want it to be really bulky. Yeah, your whole flower crown should be the greenery predominating, not the wire work. But you can get into a nice routine with this. And I normally do this of an evening, you know, put a film on, sit at the kitchen table and get this. It's very mechanical. It's a lot of the flowers, anything. It's sort of, you think of it as being a really beautiful, creative, romantic occupation, but a lot of it is just hard, physical, manual labour and having to be quite dexterous. But if it's a family wedding, you're doing the flowers, you know, get your family involved. What better way to be sitting around the kitchen table, sharing memories and making memories, and all working together. And you'll have to pass the technique on and be quality controller as well. So I always give everything, you know, a bit of a waggle. It needs to survive the waggle test, and then it should hold up on the bride's head. Wires over here. Oops, I keep knocking the camera, apologies. So I'm sitting on a stool with my camera up on its a proper tripod. So I'm sort of slightly cramped as I work, and obviously when you work you'll have all the space in the world, so you can stretch out. But again, I can feel it in my thumbs there. So be kind to yourself, don't think I'm going to, it'll take me 7 hours to do this. I'm going to get up and do 7 hours straight. You need to rest. Maybe you might even have to sit there. Perhaps it'll be the one time in your life when you start playing on a Nintendo or a Game Boy. I'm a bit out of touch with these things, but just to get your thumbs exercising. So if you are adding flowers in, and I say we will do this with flowers another time, you do need to have a bit of a pattern in your head. If let's keep things simple. Say you were using roses and wax flower would be a lovely combination. Are you going to go rose heavy and every flower crown is going to have, 12 roses in it? Or are you going to have 3 roses? And are you going to have those 3 roses centrally or more spread out? So you do have to design it out, and as we did with the simple table arrangement, it's sketching it out. You don't need to be an artist, but I think you do need to understand in your mind what it is you're producing, and to have that conversation with your bride so you both know what you're talking about. And it depends how you best communicate with each other. So I like to talk about it and sketch it down, just schematically. I would draw a straight line and then put blobs in for where my flowers are going to go. Is this the look you're after, or do you want more flowers? Mock one up. Supermarket bunch of flowers will give you adequate for practicing with, and then when you get your florist selection of flowers, you'll be all ready to go. You'll be much more confident, and you'll be able to tackle head on, because it can be nerve-wracking, even when you're doing it professionally, that it is cutting into those flowers that are the bride's pride and joy, the happiest day of her life, flooded with memories, and you don't want to be thinking, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. So I would always practice, and like I'm doing here, take the opportunity to practice with garden greenery. You've got it, to hand, do it ahead of time, find out what your problems were. And it may be you think, actually, the wiring isn't for me, it's too fiddly, but someone else in the family could do it. Or it may be that you think, actually, I think I might like my florist to do this and I'll concentrate on doing something else. So it's a good way of divvying up the jobs, having a good old think about it and seeing what you can realistically do, and remembering, if it's a family wedding, you want to be able to enjoy your wedding without stressing about the flowers. The tape has stretched too much. I was turning around. So you can, I'll have about 3 different bits of tape there, but it doesn't matter because it will all get hidden. So it's not a competition as to how, whether you can do it in one continuous piece. Yes, Joan, it's scale. When you're looking at everything, scale matters. And you can't, you don't suddenly want to go from something huge to something small. But so you do need to, that's why I say sketch it out really. And, estimate the size of a rose. If you're using those really lovely garden roses from the florist, which can be practically as big as the palm of your hand, how is that going to look on your bride? It may be that you've got the, a petite bride and she'll just look overwhelmed. So it needs to be in scale with her. And it needs to be in scale with everything else. So if you're using really chunky roses, this kind of greenery is probably going to be a bit insignificant, and you need to beef everything up a little bit. So yes, scale. All these, to create the effortless look, quite a lot of thought goes in beforehand. And this is where, because you know the pitfalls to look out for, you'll become more knowledgeable as well. So when you're talking about flowers, you'll be able to say to your daughter, well, actually, I don't think that's going to work quite so well. how about we try this while still trying to fit within, you know, the parameters of her dream wedding. So next week we will definitely be talking about mood boards, because I think it's good showing you all these things in as an abstract concept and getting your techniques ready, but you need to be thinking, you know, what you're going to do. And as I said before, it's about ruling out what you know you don't like in order perhaps that you can clarify what you do like. So I'm going to start, over the next week or so, I'm going to start getting together a box of things that would just hint at perhaps a style of wedding, and you might like to do the same thing. You know, are you going for a beach wedding, you know, city slick? We know that Vanessa is going for a woodland meadow, and perhaps looking around the house, ripping pages out of a magazine, putting everything together in a box so you can keep your ideas together. Do you normally tape up the flowers and foliage together or separate on the wires and then put them on the wire? I normally do this, Joan. I normally put every bit of greenery individually onto my main flower crown. Like so. I would wire that on individually, but it may be that you might want to save time and you could bunch things together and put it on together. So what I'm going to show you is doing it individually first, and there's always ways to speed things up, and that would be one of the ways. Once you were much more confident and you knew the look you were doing, you'd worked out your formula that, you know, you wanted one bit of bushy to 3 bits of straight material to 1 flower, you could work out your formula and bing bang bong, you could do that. I tend to do it in small bunches, but probably not longer segments. But again, it's what you feel comfortable with. I am more comfortable with adding my pieces on individually. So I'm probably got enough to make a little bit of a start. I always start over the eye, and I take something bushy and I put it over the eye to cover it up, so that when you've done the complete circle and hook to fasten, let's hook to fasten there, that when you've got your first bit of greenery on, it seals the gap, so this crown is seamless. You won't need to remember to put it on with a hook at the back, because the hook will be hidden, unless of course you've decided to have 3 roses at the front. So that is what I always start with. I then straighten my wire out, so I work on the straight piece of wire. And you're remembering to put I know the wire is tiny, but you're remembering to put everything on this top surface of the wire and cover it up. Too much tape. Again, Joan, I think it's trial and error. The only concern I have about doing it in bunches is that whether everything will actually work loose. Whereas I know, because I've taped every single thing on individually, if something falls out, it's going to be one thing that falls out and not a whole bunch of other things. So I think I would bounce the question back to you. How much time have you got to make these flower crowns? What can you do to speed it up? I'm teaching you in a very traditional way, the way I was taught at college, and these things that I remember being taught. But there's a difference between us doing it here when we've got all the time in the world versus you sitting at home having a time constraint, and you'll probably find your own workarounds and your own ways of speeding things up a little bit. I'm sure lots of people don't even wire and tape everything. They may just start off with bare wires and just directly tape. And you'll see a lot of people doing that. But again, it's down to workmanship. And would you be happy and confident that materials that had been taped but not wired were going to withstand the day? And the true test is to give it a go. You know, perhaps make yourself a flower crown in the summer, prance around the garden for 3 or 4 hours in it. You know, the longer, you know, the kind of length of time your bride or the bridesmaids will be wearing it, and see how well it fares. Make one with your excellent workmanship skills, and then make another one which is your sort of cheats version, and see whether you can discern a difference. If you can't, do your cheats version. Nobody is going to be there, you know, you're not under exam conditions or double checking. You're the only person that knows how you made it, but ultimately you need to be confident that you've made it securely and robustly. So I'm going to put my, oops, that was a bit too high, lay my greenery on top, and I could start wiring that on, you know, right down here. Can you see that? I put them side by side. So I don't need to do it down here. I could put less greenery in if I started quite high up there, because that is being hidden by the tips at the end. So I don't need to put my first bit of tape on until I come down here, which is, sorry, that far down. But if you leave it too gappy, you'll find that as it goes around your head, things will ping around. So I think I will raise it up a tiny bit. So I then tape the two together. So I'm going to tape down for about 2 centimetres. So this is the same technique as before. I'm trying to keep the two wires parallel, not letting this top one twist around. And then that's attached. I don't need this wire anymore. So I cut that away, and just remember that you're cutting away your wire from the piece of greenery, not your main wire for the crown. And then come in. And what I like to think about is a herringbone pattern. One to the middle, one to the outside, one to the other side. So I'm going middle, left, right, middle, left, right, middle, left, right, all the way down. So here I could either have that piece of green right up front, or I could shuffle it down a bit, and that gives me more coverage. And I would always suggest you place your green and then you shuffle it down and then tape that in position. So again, making sure your wires don't wrap around each other. Yeah, Joan, it's personal preference, and you know, if you're working in the florist, time is money. They just want it out, you know, professional pride and all that, but they need to be. It is an industrial process. You're part of a machine making these flower crowns, and they just need to be made. Whereas if you're doing it for your daughter, you're doing it with love and pride, and you can afford to take more time over it because you're not in a commercial setting. So next piece of greenery, if I add it straight on top of the other, it makes it nice and bushy, but I do need to shuffle it down a bit and come out at the outer edge and tape that together. Oops, tape fell apart. So again, I'm going down, you know, 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres. I'm not going all the way down, lifting that stem up from my greenery and cutting out the excess. So you can see that that's the wire that I'm working on. That's my length of my flower crown. But as I add things in, yes, it is getting slightly chunkier, and I'm trying to make sure, if I'm holding that the wrong way up, that there's nothing on this back edge. Everything is on the top and bushy out at the top. And you can see here that the eucalyptus looks lovely, but it's the bushy stuff that gives you the coverage. So when I come in with my next bit of bushy, I sort of have that going either side, but it really does fill it out. And because everything's on a wire, you can manipulate things around a little bit to how you want it to be. So bushy is your friend, really, unless you're going to go ultra skinny. So I'm putting it on there, and I might come down a little bit and tape it on there. And I say, you always make sure you're taping to the top side. This doesn't need to be, you don't want to think you're travelling in a spiral movement around your flower crown, because you're going to end up with loads of material on the back, which will mean it won't fit your bride because there'll be bulk on the inside, but also you're going to have to use twice as much material. And perhaps, you know, to speed things up a bit, I could take 2 pieces. So I'm going to offset them slightly. So that was my first piece, lying it on top, sort of offering it up nice and chunky, sliding it back just to get a bit of length. You're all the time trying to grow the crown, not to have it too, I mean chunky and thick would just be amazing, but it will just be there all day. And it's the quantity of materials that you'll need will really start to affect things. And that's tied on 2 tails. So I think, even though I've put 2 pieces in together, it just felt a bit thick to me to work on, but it's entirely up to you. So it won't look anything special to begin with. You're going to have to, you know, really put the effort in to put all your materials in. And of course, just imagine how fantastic that would be if I had got a few of the little sweetheart roses, the tiny sort of rose buds with some wax flower. It just look absolutely gorgeous there. So even so, I'm trying to go skinny. I've done between finger and thumb, and I've got how many pieces in here? I think it's my 3rd bit of conifer, and I've got 4 pieces of the small-leaved eucalyptus as well. It's, you know, it's reasonably wide, but you do need to have some bushiness in there. Otherwise it will be totally skinny. And you can see here that even though I've only come this far, it does get quite floppy. You're all the time having to turn it round. So whereas I'm being quite distinctive about rolling my greenery into the tape, by the time you get sort of halfway down, you'll find that everything's quite flop. You're sort of having to roll it over and physically roll it over, which will be fine with the greenery crown. But imagine you had roses going all the way through, and at some point you're going to have to go bump, bump. So it may be that you start your technique for wrapping the wire around your flower crown changes slightly. So I'm going to go in 1 piece off to that side, hold that in. So I'll take down about 2 centimetres, cut out the excess as I go. And then that one to that side, so this time I'm going to get this bit of green to go to the other side. You know, I'm not going to have them equal, I'm going to try and travel a tiny bit, so this one's come down a bit lower than that. Hold them together, because the warmth of my hand and the tape, although it's not sticky, they do sort of adhere a little bit, which is helpful and handy on your hands. Cut out the excess again. So you can really tell there how skinny the base wire is. And you'll see here, I'm trying to keep everything as light touch as possible, but it does get chunkier. I'll put some photographs of that in afterwards so you can see. You could do a cheat if you wanted to. I've got, you know, quite a fine piece of greenery, so we see if that works. Take off the lower stem. You know, would that speed it up? Not even wiring things. So if I don't wire it, I don't have the control to direct it into the position I want it to stay. So if I think it's in the wrong position, I can't move it. I end up risking snapping the stem. But that might be a cheat if you're looking for a cheat. And as long as you've got the cut stem sealed in the tape, it's retaining the moisture. I mean, could you tell that that piece hadn't been wired in? So that might be, you know, an option. So yeah, don't be too hidebound by the rules. And you may find, you know, not you make it up as you go along, but you're adjusting. You're working out whether it's worth doing all this stuff and being really precise and, you know, college graduate good about it. But if you're not doing an exam in it, it just needs to be able to withstand being worn. So that's why I say if you've got the time, do one properly and time how long it takes you to do, and do one that's a cheats version and time yourself there, and then wear them both and do a little bit of compare and contrast. You can see here when I start flicking my wires around, it's picking up all the bits of greenery on my table as well, so you do need to spread out a little bit. Try and keep everything under control. So I've probably been working on that. We started the video, I think, at just gone 11. So that's taken me to do that a good half an hour. So you can see what I would do is I would wire all your green up to begin with and be mechanical about it. Count how many bits of bushy, how many bits of eucalyptus, how many bits of bushy foliage. So you know that each flower crown takes, 40 pieces of bush, 20 pieces of eucalyptus. You want, 15 roses in it. So it does, goes against the grain, doesn't it? We want to be romantic with our flowers, but actually it's a counting game. And all the time you're thinking, how much more can I put in there? What am I going to do? Have I got enough to eke out what I want to do? For speed, I didn't wire up enough conifer, but to get some coverage, I'm going to do that little cheat again. And making sure that if you are going to cheat, you wrap around the clean stem, the stem that's got no greenery on it. Otherwise you will be in trouble, because as the greenery dries out, it will shrink a bit and your tape won't shrink back. So you'll end up with a sort of little socket, a pocket, where there's nothing to hold your greenery in place. So do take care. So adding it in and then see if you can shuffle it down a bit. Yeah, I think the smaller ones are going to work best, Joan. And it's about that look. You're happy with that and I think you'll be more confident and more comfortable. And you can step out of your comfort zone when you're doing your flowers for pleasure at home, when you're going to your flower club and doing your church flowers. Perhaps that's the time to be more adventurous. But keep it, make sure you're happy. You don't want to be stressed out on what should be a lovely special day for your family. Yeah, delicate. I think delicate's the way to go. But maybe if, a bit full on, perhaps if you've got a fancy party to go to in the summer, you can go and amaze everybody with your over-the-top flower crown of huge roses. Cheating, I didn't wire up enough of the conifer. So I think probably, Joan, I am a third of the way along. I am being slightly slower because I didn't wire up enough materials to begin with. So I would say my top tips are plan it out, sketch it out. So first of all, measure the circumference of the head and the position in which the crown is going to be worn. If you're wearing it quite low, the circumference will be longer. And if you're wearing it sort of higher up, you can get away with a smaller crown. You need to measure that out on a piece of paper. And then if you are having flowers in, you need to do an approximate size of your flower. Are you having flowers throughout? So that might be 12 medium-sized roses and your greenery, and try and guesstimate what you're going to have to need. I would then, on that guesstimate, I would attempt to wire every single thing up and tape it before you start, and then do the prep and then do the construction as a separate activity. If you try doing what I'm doing now, when I didn't have enough materials, I think it slows you up. And I would much rather have, as I said before, one night prepare everything, second day is to put it all together. But you can see how it goes along, and even with those, just the 2 bits of greenery, that does look quite delicate. It's got some nice natural movement. It's as slim line as possible as I can make it on the back. I'll put some photographs in there, and you can imagine that if I carried on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and you'll end up with the tufty stalky bits at the end. So you'll finish something like that. And you think, oh no, that looks horrible. But remembering that when you come and fix it together, the tufty stalky bits are hidden under that first bit of fluff that you put in. So that's the advantage of doing a continuous band round, is that the end piece is hidden under the front. And you can see as I just change it round, things feel quite robust. I can shape it to the head. So although the flowers will fan out a little bit, I've got no obvious gaps. That's the only downside if you are too sparse with your materials. As you shape it from the straight line of the flower crown to the form of your head, you will discover that they sort of ping up a little bit. So you do need to make sure, okay, with everything, it's that right balance between having enough materials that it does the job, but equally not being so chunky that you run out of materials, but not so sparse that when you come to shape it to your head, you do sort of looks like spokes of the bicycle wheel coming up and you've got all these gaps. But you can see there, if I continued on, that gives you a really nice feel. So what I would do is I'll put some photos into the group. I will give you some list of materials that you need to use, and I'll also, the photographs everyone wants to see is sort of the back end of everything, just so you can check about what you're doing and how you're getting on. So I'm going to sign off for now. So Jen, you're asking, how do you sketch it down? So I would say it's the planning element. So I have measured this to my head. I can get it undone again. So if I put a ruler down and measured how far it is from there to there, I don't know how big my head is. It's more than 30 centimetres. Let's say that's 40 centimetres, 45 centimetres. You need to draw out a line of 45 centimetres and just think, how many flowers do I need? So if you wanted your flowers, your roses, for instance, to be quite close together, you could, if you've got a rose about that big, you're perhaps drawing around an egg cup, and it does get that mechanical. You want a straight line that's the length that matches the circumference of your head, and then something to draw around like an egg cup, and decide how many flowers you want and count them up, and that's the way it goes. So it doesn't happen by accident. You are being the designer and you were designing everything in, and then from there work out your greenery. And once you've done one, so do a practice one, and then you'll know that for every flower crown I needed 3 bunches of or 3 stems of eucalyptus and 2 stems of conifer, or whatever it is you're deciding to use. So you do really need to break it down into the building blocks. So I can't give you the precise answers because I don't know how big your head is, and I don't know what flowers you're going to use, and I would have to do exactly the same thing. So break it down, measure your head, draw that straight line on a piece of paper, and then draw around some egg cups to give you the idea of how big your roses were going to be, as to how many you would need for your flower crown. So I hope that helps, and I'll take some photographs and I will give you a shopping list, and I will endeavour to finish this off in the next day or so and come back and show you what the finished thing looks like. So that's all from me for now. I'll catch up with you next week, and we'll be doing mood boards next week. So that's your homework for this week, is to think about mood board. What ingredients could you put into a box to give you the essence of the feel and the look of your wedding? It might be a swatch of fabric, it might be something you've ripped out of a magazine, it might be a favourite colour, but just start to build a picture around what you're doing before you get into the nitty-gritty of the individual arrangements, because at the moment it's all very theoretical about technique, but you actually want to apply those techniques to the specifics of what your own individual wedding is going to be like. So I'll say goodbye for now, and I'll see you next week.